911, what is the emergency?
Oh my God.
Everywhere you could go in this building, there was blood.
I just came up to the door and I noticed it was unlocked, which is just, it's never unlocked. And I'm just really scared to go in.
You just wonder how in the world somebody could be this vicious.
We were looking for two boogeymen.
How could this have happened?
It's nuts. It's crazy.
Something's not right here.
What's the name of the business?
It's Lululemon Athletica. I need an ambulance right away.
Just 7 miles outside the nation's capital sits one of the wealthiest suburbs in America.
Bethesda, Maryland is a very affluent suburb of Washington, D.C. You know, it's Washington, so you're going to have your lawyers, your lobbyists.
And Bethesda is very famous as being one of the most educated communities in the United States. It's a lovely neighborhood, great schools. It's where you want to live.
It's a really safe area, so this case was certainly out of the ordinary.
One of Bethesda's trendiest stores was Lululemon, known for its high-end yoga gear and apparel. But on the night of March 11th, 2011, 2 employees faced an unimaginable nightmare.
Brittany Norwood and Jana Murray were both ambitious, attractive young women.
Jana was larger than life. She loved dancing and singing, and she had this beautiful blonde hair.
She was just an amazing person that you wanted to be around.
Her goal was always to go back to school, get her second master's. On her 30th birthday, she went bungee jumping, which is something I would never do, but she's amazing.
Brittany, looking to start a career in the community, she was a very accomplished athlete who was recruited across the United States to play soccer for a university out on Long Island.
And one thing that drew them together and how they met each other was the store where they worked, which is Lululemon.
That Friday night, Jana and Brittany closed the store together.
Montgomery County 911, what is the emergency?
I'm opening up my Lululemon store, and the door was completely open, and I hear someone moaning in the back, and it looks like it's been vandalized, and I'm just really scared to go in.
The young lady that was the manager of the store, she went over that morning. She had some apprehension that things were not the way they were supposed to be.
911, what is the emergency?
Hi, yes, I just called 911 to come. There's 2 people. One person seems dead and the other person is breathing. The door was open this morning. I think one of my managers came in to open it. Someone tied her up. She's still breathing. Oh my God.
When I first went inside the store, there was some signs of a disturbance. A mannequin was knocked over. Some clothes had been pulled down. To the right as you walk in is where the cash register and the counters are. And there were some receipts on the floor. And then as you walked further into the store, you could see more signs of a disturbance.
And everywhere you could go in this building, there was blood. Some of the blood was footprints that tracked from the front to the back, into the various dressing rooms, into the back hallways, into the back of the store.
When the first officers went inside the store, they're the ones that found Brittany on the bathroom floor. Brittany was on her back with her wrists zip-tied. Her arms were above her head, and her ankles were also zip-tied.
She appeared to have some physical injuries to her head. There was blood all over her face.
She had scratch marks on her abdomen. Some of her clothes had been ripped, and you could see the blood on her clothes.
They went and were looking around further into the back area, and there was a door that led to a back hallway. But as they began to push that door open, it pushed up against something that seemed to be blocking its way. But they said, my God, there's someone here. There's an enormous amount of blood back here. Looks like we have a second victim.
Jana was face down in a storage area, and she was completely covered in blood. There was so much blood there that we couldn't even assess the type or the number of injuries initially. We knew that she was deceased.
Both of them had cuts to their clothing that would have suggested rape or other forms of sexual attack.
Our first impression that it probably was a robbery. There were receipts on the floor by the cash register. There was blood all over the doggone place.
2 unique pairs of shoe prints in blood all over this store.
So it appeared that there were at least 2 people that were involved in the assault.
Jana didn't live a risky life, so to think that she was somehow put in harm's way randomly out of nowhere was unfathomable.
The medical examiner determined that Jana had been cut, stabbed, and bludgeoned more than 330 times.
Jana Murray's murder was really beyond overkill.
It was a vicious attack. I'd never seen anything like it in my life.
She had multiple injuries of different shape, so that different items had been used to strike her.
I was getting the first reports from the detectives. You can see by the things that they found at the scene that had blood on them that likely could have been weapons, that this was just a horrific attack on Jana.
In the course of the attack, I think 8 to 10 different weapons were used against her.
The weapons included a hammer, wrench, and box cutters.
I went to the medical examiner and I said, look, doctor, I want to ask you, how many of these injuries did she sustain before she died? The answer was, she was alive for all of them. The attack probably lasted 15 to 20 minutes. Horrific.
It broke my heart to know how the last moments of her life were. And the crime scene photos show that.
So initially, Brittany was interviewed at the hospital. She was taken from the scene by ambulance to Suburban Hospital. One of the first things she said was, "Is Jana okay?"
I know that you've been through a lot. Well, I haven't been down to the scene yet.
We felt the benefit in the investigation of having a living, surviving victim to give us leads.
And we actually left at about 9:45. We left the store. And I got to the Metro and actually realized I didn't have my wallet. I called her and let her know I didn't have my wallet. So I just met her back in front of the store.
And they went back to the store together, only to be followed in by 2 men, one taller, one shorter, all dressed in black, who kind of separated them and began to individually attack both of them.
The other guy drug her in.
Drug Jana?
Yeah, by her hair across the floor. Into, I guess it's her storage room, and he was just repeatedly hitting her.
All she could tell us at that time was that there were 2 masked men that robbed the store.
But there was so much blood from her. And I couldn't do anything. And all I could think was it was my fault because I forgot my wallet and I couldn't help her.
In the meantime, she described a very violent physical and sexual attack against herself.
He was I don't with dirty anyway. He told me if I didn't shut up and stop moving, he'd make sure I never had kids again.
She told Detective Mackey that she had been sexually assaulted with a coat hanger. And there was actually a wooden coat hanger on the floor by the bathroom.
I think I blacked out. I don't even remember how they left. I don't know.
When you have a crime of this nature in a neighborhood where a violent crime was largely unknown, the fear was instantaneous.
Murder at a yoga store that has shocked an upscale suburb of Washington, D.C.
On Bethesda Avenue, where shoplifting used to be a store's biggest concern, now there's talk of alarms, panic buttons, and police.
We were scared, who are these people that would do this to 2 young women working in a store late at night? I mean, that was pretty unbelievable.
And as the investigation ramped up, detectives ran into a problem.
They were looking at the crime scene. They were looking up. There were no surveillance cameras in this store.
The store next to Lululemon is the Apple store. I went down and I interviewed the people at the Apple store and watched their video inside the Apple store, where you can see the manager and the assistant manager standing at the wall listening to the entire attack. And it's date and timestamp. So we begin to get a timeline.
As we're doing that, in fact, there was a video camera behind where the store was, and you see 2 dark figures, clearly males. They pass underneath the camera, and so you just see the backs of them. They're dressed in dark clothing, and they're just walking down the alley.
I thought to myself, my God, those were our guys.
A mystery rocked one of the wealthiest suburbs in the country. Jana Murray and Brittany Norwood, who had just closed a Lululemon store, were found inside the following morning, one injured and one dead.
The store employee was found murdered, discovered along with another co-worker who was tied up after being sexually assaulted by two masked men.
You've got in one room Jana, who is deceased and just covered in hundreds of stab wounds. And then in the other room you have Brittany, who is tied up.
Jana was discovered in a pool of blood that later revealed at least 331 injuries.
At some point in time, she dropped to her knees and the attack continued. Finally, she fell all the way to the ground. It looks like catastrophic injuries that had occurred when she went down.
So the assailant was beating her while she really wasn't able to fight back anymore.
It's just a vicious, vicious attack.
Brittany Norwood was embraced almost immediately by this community.
The one girl lived, but she'll never be the same. She will never be the same. I mean, I can only, every time she closes her eyes.
I just remember there being so much blood. And I had blood like almost all over me.
The information that we got from Brittany was, in fact, that two men had broken into the store, sexually assaulted them, attacked them, and obviously we knew killed Jana.
As police raced to find the suspects, video caught something suspicious behind the Apple store.
You see two dark figures, clearly males. They pass underneath the camera and they're dressed in dark clothing and they're just walking down the alley.
I thought to myself, my God, those were our guys. Let's go find out who those guys are.
We are asking people to try to remember if they saw two subjects who were acting suspicious.
Within days of the investigation, detectives tracked down the two men from the video.
Well, we later found out that these were two workers from a restaurant down the street that just happened to be walking through the alley at that particular time.
Investigators determined the men had nothing to do with the murder.
By that time, she had been released from the hospital and she was staying with her sister. Initially, when we talked to Brittany, again, she said that there were a lot of things that she didn't remember about the assault.
Sometimes sexual assault victims are so traumatized by the attack, they just don't remember, they just blocked it out.
She gave us a few more details as far as she thought that the suspects were white.
Describe the guy that assaulted you then.
He was wearing all black. I noticed that he had on some type of mask where the eyes were cut out.
After Dimitri and I had finished talking with Brittany, she has a brother, Chris, and Chris came outside by the rear steps of the house and wanted to talk to us. And he said that there were some things that just weren't jibing with him.
Information that I heard it didn't add up. If you're robbing a store, you get in, you get what you're looking for, and you get the hell out of there, so you don't want to get caught. That didn't make sense, that you would take all that time to do all these heinous things and then rob the store.
And so he's more or less scratching his head just trying to figure it out. It just wasn't sitting right with him. He also said that he was aware that Lululemon really didn't do a cash business, that most of their business was by credit cards.
All of a sudden, my detectives are starting to raise an eyebrow. This really isn't adding up. Something's not right here. This was a nice store in a nice neighborhood. You just wonder how in the world somebody could be this vicious.
To kind of set the wheels in motion.
You've got one victim who is not just killed, but just savagely attacked. And you've got another victim who has a couple of superficial wounds. Well, why were her wounds just superficial?
It's Friday night. It's a very active area. For no one to have seen anything. And the girls had even left the store. They had left, locked up, came back, and somehow these guys timed it perfectly. Nothing adds up.
And you've got all these bloody shoe prints on the scene, but none appear to leave the store. And so the thought is, well, did they take their shoes off? Well, as the crime scene techs go through, they find the shoes that were used to make the prints. They were shoes that were in the store, and they had been put back and sort of hidden.
The detectives and crime scene people found one large pair of men's shoes that had blood on the tread. It had appeared to be washed off.
So again, you're thinking, okay, I guess the person who wore the shoes wore them and took them off so that they wouldn't leave with any evidence.
A medical examiner determined that the weapons believed to have been used in Jana's murder came from the store as well.
If two people are coming in with the intent to attack these two victims, wouldn't they bring a weapon with them? Did they just assume that they were going to be able to overpower these victims?
It kind of all didn't really make sense.
Then, a new tip came in.
Mrs. Murray told me that Jana had a silver Pontiac. The car was nowhere around the store.
But she parked right in front of the store. Look, this was going to be, I'm going to be in and out, you're going to get your card, and we're going to go home.
The patrol officer found Jana's car parked in a parking lot about 3 blocks away, which was unusual. We looked at it closely, and we saw blood inside the car. There was a hat with blood on the inside of the hat band.
The police noticed the location of the blood on the hat band seemed to match up with the location of Brittany's forehead injury.
At some point, one of my police officers, one of the patrol officers who's working midnights in the Bethesda district, he noticed the car, and he noticed that there was someone in it. He gave a description of the person in it. It could have been Brittany.
Evidence was now starting to suggest the unthinkable. Brittany Norwood was the lone survivor in the gruesome attack at a Lululemon store. Police discovered her co-worker Jana Murray dead and lying face down in a back hallway with hundreds of wounds.
It's pretty clear in my mind that Jana tried to escape out the fire exit. She had some blood on her hands already, and there was blood on the push bar to get out the door. So after running back an L-shaped corridor, it appears that she was trapped at the end of that corridor, and it's at that location that her body was found.
And Bill Vosberg, the blood spatter expert, looking at the pictures, he found the murder weapon.
The store was a yoga store that had clothing on the rack, and they use a thing called a merchandise peg.
It's just this steel thing that clothes go on, and it's got a nasty little angle to it.
And I found a photograph of one of those that had blood spatter streaking up the side of it.
And he was absolutely dead right. There were actually injuries on Jana's body that corresponded exactly to the formation and the pattern of the end of the merch peg.
But as detectives analyzed the evidence, not everything was fitting with Brittany's story.
There's just so many things that didn't make sense.
One of the biggest issues was it appears that Brittany was the one in the car. This is not what was initially reported.
5 days after the murder, detectives asked Brittany Norwood for fingerprints and hair samples as a ploy to get her to come in to the police station.
So, we just wanted to go over, well, some things.
Brittany was unaware that detectives were now looking at her as a possible suspect.
Did Jana say where she was going after she got off work?
As far as I knew, home.
Do you know what kind of car she has?
I don't. I saw it once, but I don't know the make and model.
But her response didn't calm detectives' suspicions that she may have been in Jana's car.
There's a lot of details of men in masks. So she was locked into the story.
All you can see is like blood. He tells me that I'm like more fun with or something. You're lucky you're cute. You're more fun with.
At one point, she said that the bad guys held her driver's license up and said, "We know where you live now. If you do anything, we're going to come back."
He tells me that if I say too much, he knows where I live. And he tells me he'll kill me.
Brittany didn't mention this when she was interviewed initially.
The detective started seeing things that didn't add up.
Where did he get the zip ties from? And, I mean, when? Because it sounds like he was probably with you the entire time.
I don't know.
The zip ties that Brittany is tied up with are right there in the store.
Because there's a box of zip ties in the back of the storage room.
What boogeyman in their mask would know these were back here?
I'm scared for my life right now.
Okay, and
I don't feel safe.
so what are you saying, that you're holding back because you're afraid? Because, come on, you gotta help us.
I really don't want to talk anymore.
But before Brittany left, Detective Drury wanted to make sure he asked one more time about Jana's car.
Has she ever given you a ride home or anything?
If DNA tests confirmed her blood was in Jana's car, this would prove she was lying.
You can lie to me all doggone day long if you want to. A lie is sometimes just as good as the truth if you can prove that it's a lie.
Vosberg's blood spatter work really put this case together.
I saw a crime scene that didn't look right very quickly. What I'm looking at here is Brittany Norwood laying on the floor of one of the bathrooms in the store, and there's some pretty obvious staging of this scene. So the blood that was on the middle of the bathroom floor, there was a lot wrong with it. When Brittany Norwood was found at that location, she was lying on top of this. It was 100% dry, and there was no transfer of any of that blood to any of her clothing. And then Brittany had blood down her face. And so in blood spatter, you say, well, the blood went all the way down to her chin by gravity, but she's laying back here at this point. So why is that? It was a red flag. It appeared to be doctored with some moisture and fingers pulling it out into the cheek area. It just didn't look convincing to me.
It doesn't make sense that her hands were up here when she could just move them down.
The way she was found was a very unnatural position. She may have been unconscious, but the human condition with any degree of consciousness will go to a fetal position.
And when investigators looked closer at the shoe prints in the store, they made a shocking discovery.
There were only 2 sets of prints among the blood on the floor in that shop. One belonged to Brittany, and one belonged to a set of shoes used by the store for customers to try on when they're hemming the yoga pants. There weren't any other prints there. There weren't any prints that belonged to any other suspects.
The second pair of shoes found inside the store were Brittany's.
When you were found, your shoes were off, okay? Do you remember how they came off?
Detectives no longer thought there were 2 masked assailants.
But all of a sudden you realize, my God, this girl did it. What Brittany appears now to have done is she put on the men's shoes, she walked around in the blood, and then walked all around in the place, creating the second set of footprints to basically establish there were 2 people. But then what she did is she washed the shoes off, cleared them off of the blood, and put them back in a cabinet.
The location looked very staged, not a natural gait for somebody walking. Brittany had all night to engineer a scene that would basically tell a different story than what happened.
May I say, I was not one of the first ones that began to question Brittany. I thought she was a victim. Nobody wants to believe it's the pretty girl next door. I think it was my interview with the Apple people when I thought she did this. Watched their video, watching them, listening, and all of a sudden we heard the voices in the argument. It wasn't a male-female voice. It was clearly 2 women.
Once we came to the conclusion, Brittany knows more than she's telling, all this stuff started to come into better focus. The indication is that she's the one who killed Jana.
Suddenly, there's a big break in the case.
Brittany was starting to remember more things.
I felt like she was the one that lit up the room. And part of this that hurts me the most is that she'll never have children that will love her the way that mine do.
Jana Murray was found killed, and her co-worker Brittany Norwood was found injured one morning at an upscale yoga store. The more Brittany retold the story of what she says happened, the less it made sense to investigators.
As the investigation goes on, more and more things don't add up. were starting to wonder if Brittany was really a victim.
I started thinking, we got to look at things a little bit more closely. The rape examination found out that there was no trauma. Brittany had not been sexually assaulted. We knew from looking at the photographs that Brittany's injuries were self-inflicted. They were linear, some of them were parallel. Brittany's brother and sister called me up at the office and said that Brittany wanted to come in. Brittany remembered that the bad guys had made her move Jana's car.
Thanks for coming back in.
Brittany wasn't aware that detectives were closing in on her as their main suspect.
Prior to him sexually assaulting me and zip tying me, they made me move her car.
Okay.
I know where her car is.
She went from, I never saw Jana's car, to, they made me move her car. What?
They said if I was to pass anyone and open my mouth, I can consider myself dead. And that one of them would be watching the entire time. And I remember seeing a cop, and I was just too scared to even flag him down, do anything.
Are you kidding me? Come on, give me a break. Who's going to believe some stuff like that?
You left out some things, okay? So let's see if you remember some other stuff.
Left out what?
Well, as far as like the car thing is concerned.
I know, and that's the only thing.
To see her sitting there so cool and collected, like, it was unbelievable.
How did they go about telling you that you had to move the car, okay?
I don't...
Well, you were there.
I know I was there.
Why did she feel so compelled to have to move Jana's car? It's really simple. Rachel lived across the street. Rachel was the manager of the Lululemon. She'd have seen the car and probably gone over to the store to make sure everything was okay.
I had a hat on. It's a black hat.
Okay, why did they make you put the hat on?
I don't know. Do you know how many times they hit me in my head? I don't know why. At that point, I just did whatever they said.
And then she comes up with a fantastic story about how she voluntarily went back to the Lululemon. That was just unbelievable.
You're walking from the store to the car, and you see a cop car going by, and you said that like you passed a couple of people, and you got in the car and you drove off. Okay. People would probably ask, well, why didn't you just keep on going and not go back?
I was scared for my life.
Okay.
I was scared for my life. That's all I could tell you.
These skilled detectives are just digging the hole deeper and deeper for her.
But it was obvious that every time you talked with Brittany, that she was coming up with more explanations.
Okay, so you remember wanting to crawl to get your phone? Okay. I guess people would ask, why didn't you?
I don't know if I blacked out.
I was good with letting her keep rolling with the story, keep rolling with the lies. I love it, okay? I finally caved in. The decision was made that we were going to confront Brittany.
No, what you've done is you've concocted an incredible story that doesn't make any doggone sense.
Jana Murray was discovered murdered inside a Lululemon store with hundreds of injuries, while her co-worker Brittany Norwood was found zip-tied and bloody. Brittany recounted that event with investigators, who quickly found inconsistencies in her story.
I was good with letting her keep rolling with the story, keep rolling with the lies. I love it, okay? I finally caved in. The decision was made that we were going to confront Brittany.
Brittany, comes a point sometimes when we have to break down and get everything off of our chests, okay? You gotta tell us what really happened.
I'm telling you.
Okay, because I know what really happened.
I'm telling you what really happened.
No, what you've done is you've concocted an incredible story that doesn't make any doggone sense.
No.
You better get this right, because this entire community has embraced this young woman. And if we're going to charge her with a murder, we got to make sure we get this right.
Listen to me, okay? I've been doing this I've been a cop for over 30 years, and I've seen a lot of stuff. Sometimes people get into situations way over their heads. And it's like, what the hell am I going to do now? I guess we can start off with the injuries that you have. They're self-inflicted. Yeah, they're self-inflicted. You did this to yourself.
No, I didn't.
And I'll tell you why. I know this.
I would never do this.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
We got some of the crime scene photos out and laid them out in front of her to show her just exactly what we had.
It's incredible that you want me or anyone to believe that you're lying like this overnight, haven't moved, okay? That's posed. As soon as you heard somebody coming in the store, it's like, oh God.
I think Jimmy really wanted a confession.
So why did you kill her then?
I didn't. No, I didn't. I never do that. Jana was my friend.
Okay, then who did kill her? Because there were not two guys in there.
Yes.
No.
Brittany was a phenomenal actress. She could literally cry on cue.
And I think that you need to, like, really get this off your chest.
I would never kill her. I would never kill anyone.
I don't think that you meant to kill her. I think that went south real fast for whatever reason, and that you went off.
No.
Now, I will tell you, now in hindsight, I go back and you look at it, she cries without tears.
These guys give you the keys, tell you to go move her car. Okay? A cop goes by, and you don't flag him down.
No, because
okay?
I was scared.
You get in the car and you drive off and park it and then come back so that they can kill you? Come on.
Eventually, we decided that we weren't getting anywhere. Her brother and sister were there. I decided, let's go on and to have them come inside, talk with Brittany, see if she would say something to them. When we first brought Chris and Marissa into the interview room, they didn't know what was up. And I hit them with the fact that we thought that Brittany was good for the murder.
Brittany killed Jana.
That's not possible.
But it's true.
It's not true.
And Marissa just couldn't handle it. She burst into tears and left the room. But her brother Chris stayed there.
Can I talk to her for a minute? Alone?
Sure.
I decided to let Chris stay inside the room and see if she would give it up to Chris.
One of the things that helped us in this case is they kept her talking.
Should I ask you? Did you?
I want to talk about it here.
I
just want to go.
Wait, hold on.
Brittany talks very, very softly. She wasn't aware, and her brother and sister weren't aware, that the interviews were being recorded.
At some point in time, she was breaking down because her brother's asking her, Brittany, what happened? You can trust me.
Listen, I don't know if they're going to let you go. You just tell me right now. Did you do it?
Chrissy, I just want to go.
Brittany, I'm not going to let you out, but you need to tell me so I know how to talk to these guys. Because if you did, we have to get you a lawyer to defend you.
I just don't want to talk about it here, but I want to tell you everything.
I think she probably had resigned herself to the fact that the jig was up.
I'm going to ruin our whole thing.
You're not going to ruin it. Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Why?
I don't know how it happened. Chris, honestly, I was doing good. I mean,
I believe.
She just began to say to her brother, I was doing better, which led to my question, what are you doing better from?
And that was just about as much of an admission that we were ever able to pick up.
You're going to be under arrest and charged with murder, Brittany. We know what you did. The only remaining question really is, why did it start?
Tonight we've arrested Brittany Norwood, age 27, for the murder of Jana Murray.
In a bizarre twist, police now say a woman who claimed that she was also a victim in this case was, in fact, the killer.
She brutally beat and slashed Murray to death after closing the store and then staged an elaborate setup and story that she and Murray were the victims of two masked men.
It was like mind-blowing, like you don't know who you work with.
As the investigation continued, our analysis of forensic evidence was not supporting Ms. Norwood's story. In fact, it was taking us in a different direction.
There were a lot of things that really nailed Brittany.
There was a dental analysis to indicate that she pulled the zip tie using her teeth on herself.
She tied herself up. You put the things around your hands, bite it, pull back, and lay down. Done.
The zip ties weren't that tight. She could have gotten out with very little effort.
The DNA results for the blood in Jana's car was confirmed to be Brittany's.
What convicted Brittany? Ultimately, that she had a motive. When Jana checked Brittany's bag, she found a pair of jogging pants worth about $120. She said that she had paid for it. Couldn't produce a receipt.
Brittany, okay. I know about the thefts. I know that Jana found clothing in your bag.
No, she didn't.
Listen.
No, Jana did not think I stole anything.
So why did you kill her then?
I didn't. No, I didn't. I never do that. Jana was my friend.
When Jana was summoned back to the store, I think it was a ruse. It was a ruse to basically say, look, please don't report me. But Jana already had, and probably said, I'm sorry, it's too late.
I really did forget my mom. I really did.
I believe that. Did she accuse you of shoplifting? Is that what it's all about?
Yes. I didn't think anything.
Earlier that night, Jana called her manager because she thought Brittany was stealing.
Brittany had some hope that she could control the story, and then realized that that story was already out there, and I think she snapped.
Over a pair of yoga pants that Jana loses her life, it makes absolutely no doggone sense. It's nuts.
I don't think this was a premeditated act in the sense that this was something she was planning to do for weeks. It evolved rather quickly after she got caught stealing.
I believe that Brittany was a kleptomaniac. She had a history of stealing going all the way back to high school.
In her senior year, she lost her scholarship because she got caught stealing from her teammates.
Other girls on the team told me things like, watch your locker, keep it locked. She's been known to steal things.
We found out that she had been engaged to a doctor, and after they broke up, apparently she had been breaking into his house for the next year and a half, each time going in, stealing items from his house.
It's horrific, the magnitude that she went to try to cover up this crime. To be in that environment all night long, like, who does that and who lives through that? She's a monster.
Jana doesn't get to live her life. She doesn't get to have children. Her parents can't visit her. The YouTube video of her jumping off the bridge for her 30th birthday was so Jana. That shows who she was and how brave she was.
And we'll never, ever forget her. She will always be a part of my life.
Every time that I have something that I'm going through in life that's difficult or that I'm unsure about, I think about, like, what would Jana do?